Hey Optimancers, Chris here. The Tal'Dorei campaign setting Reborn from Critical Role is now available on D&D Beyond. Apparently I've been getting the pronunciation on that a little bit wrong, but hopefully that's right. So I'm doing a series of videos covering the subclasses and feats in that supplement, and today I am going over the Circle of the Blighted Druid. So going in, I figured this subclass would be based on the Blighted Prestige class from D&D 3.5, which was basically like an anti-druid. However, I'm pleased to report that this is more of an original concept, where the Circle of the Blighted is more about the corruption of plants and animals, which I find to be a pretty cool concept. Starting at second level, we get two features. The first is Defile Ground. This is a once per short or long rest feature that requires a bonus action to activate, and there's going to be a lot of features that work around this feature. And basically, you create a 10-foot radius area of corruption on the ground centered on a point within 60 feet of your druid. The corruption lasts for a minute, and you can actually move it up to 30 feet with a bonus action on your subsequent turns. The area is considered difficult terrain for your enemies, but not you or your allies. But you probably don't want to be in the area anyways, because the first time a creature in the area takes damage from either an attack or a spell on any turn, they take some additional necrotic damage. Now this bit does affect you and your allies. The additional damage is just a d4, but if you think about it, it's going to potentially be a lot of d4s. I'll get back to that, but I should first mention that this does not affect flying creatures, so you need to be on the corrupted ground. And the feature scales, covering a 20-foot radius at level 10, and the damage increasing to a d6 at that time, and the damage increases again at 14th level to a d8. There's actually an important scaling of this feature, again at level 6, and technically at level 14 as well, which are listed in their own features, so we'll get into those later. So here's why the d4 damage is more than you might think. So first off, this is impacting all creatures in the area. So let's say you set this up and say there's 3 creatures in the area. Then you follow it up with, say, a Thunderwave spell that hits all 3. Well, that's an extra d4 extra damage to each of them. Then your conjured animals make their attacks, d4 more damage. Then your allies do their stuff, d4s and more d4s. Then, of course, they move out of the corrupted area on their turn. Then you move the area so they're back in it, and rinse and repeat. So that d4 is not going to feel overly dramatic when you roll it, but you may potentially be rolling it a lot of times for one use of this feature. Obviously, this is going to be more effective against groups of enemies that are occupying a fairly tight area, but overall, for a second level feature that is using a bonus action and it's lasting a minute without concentration, I think this is pretty decent. The Blighted Druid also gets Blighted Shape at second level, and your Druid starts to show signs of corruption that provides proficiency in the Intimidation skill. Now, they screwed up the wording here slightly. Charisma Intimidation is the check. The skill, it's just Intimidation. The distinction only really matters though if you use the optional rule where you might apply other ability scores to a skill. So with Intimidation, maybe your DM might allow you to use Strength instead of Charisma if you're trying to intimidate physically, for example. But certainly what's intended here is you get proficiency in the Intimidation skill. I generally prefer if these kinds of features either give you another option or maybe expertise if you're already proficient, because if you already have the Intimidation proficiency, you kind of get swindled out of your free proficiency here. But that's a small nitpick. I mean, it's just a skill. Additionally, your wild shape forms get a +2 armor class bonus and an additional 60 feet of dark vision if it already has that sense. And this is a nice little feature. As a non-moon druid, you likely aren't using wild shape for combat, more for utility. And that additional 60 feet of dark vision could come in handy. I don't see the +2 armor class having much impact. Generally, your wild shape options have pretty lousy armor classes, and +2 really isn't going to make any form available to you combat ready. Blighted Shape is definitely more of a ribbon. Defile Ground is the big feature at level 2, but this is fine. And at level 6, our Defile Ground feature gets better. Anytime a creature that isn't undead or a construct takes damage while in our Defile Ground area, we can use our reaction to create a Blighted Sapling. Here's a stat block on your screen. The Blighted Sapling appears within 5 feet of the creature that took the damage, and you can have it immediately attack that creature. Afterwards, the sapling acts on our initiative, obeying our commands. The sapling does not disappear when our Defile Ground feature ends. It lasts until it drops to 0 hit points, or we complete a long rest, or we summon another sapling. We can reuse this feature a number of times equal to our proficiency bonus per long rest, and considering we have only one bladed ground use per short rest, that's probably at least one bladed sapling per use, one at a time, of course. So there's a couple things mechanically we should take note of here. So we summon the sapling as a reaction when a creature takes damage, and it attacks that creature immediately. So if it hits, it's not going to do the extra defile ground damage on that attack, because that creature already took damage on the same turn. So it's already had its D4 necrotic damage for that turn already. Then it says here that afterwards the sapling acts on your initiative. I notice it doesn't say it acts on your turn, so presumably it has its own turn on the same initiative count as yours, but it doesn't say whether that turn occurs before or after your turn. Maybe the intent is that it is supposed to act on your turn, but I'm not sure. It also doesn't say whether giving it verbal commands takes any kind of action. Normally in 5th edition, these kinds of features either require some kind of action by you, usually it's a bonus action, or they specifically say that they don't require any kind of action from you. Like, here's the Summon Beast spell. You can see it says, it obeys your verbal commands, no action required by you. It would be helpful if this feature included this wording, just for clarity, but I am assuming there's no action required. My biggest question here, though, is when it takes its turn. If it acts on our turn, just keep in mind that if it does do damage with an attack to a creature in our defiled ground, and we do damage to that same creature on that same turn, we can only apply the extra necrotic damage on the first instance of damage. If it has its own turn, either before or after us, then it's going to get the extra damage if it does damage with its attack. Should also note that the Bladed Sapling is not immune to necrotic damage from defiled ground. It is resistant, however, it will get immunity at level 10, as we'll see when we get there. So I think this is a nice feature, but you'll need to decide along with your DM when the sapling takes its turn. A lot of these kinds of features have the creature take its turn immediately after yours, so that's probably how I would run it, and what I would probably recommend to anyone else using this. Something else I'll note here is that at least before 10th level, our subclass features are mainly centered around defiled ground, which is a good enough feature, but unless you're taking regular short rests, you won't be using it every combat, and also, remember that it doesn't do anything to a flying creature. So if you are facing flying creatures, your subclass really isn't helping you out with features very much at this point. It's just a little weakness in the subclass that I noted. Though maybe the play is to put down your defiled ground anyways, and then hope to knock the flying creatures out of the air by knocking them prone or something. Keep in mind there won't be any extra necrotic damage added to the falling damage though, because defiled ground only applies to attacks and spells. But let's get to level 10. I like this level 10 feature, Foul Conjuration. It provides your summoned creatures a bit of a boost. This includes our Blighted Sapling, and of course, druids are known for having a good selection of summoning spells. First, they get immunity to necrotic and poison damage, as well as the poison condition. This is also important because if we are using defiled ground, then that means that none of our summoned creatures can take the extra damage from defiled ground. And secondly, when the summoned creature is reduced to 0 hit points, it blows up! And you can also use your action to have it explode. Every creature within 5 feet makes a Constitution saving throw against your spell DC or takes necrotic damage. This does have friendly fire, so you and your allies probably want to give your summoned creatures some space. Though remember, the summoned creatures themselves, if you have more than one of them, they're all immune to necrotic damage, so they don't need to worry about another summoned creature next to them blowing up. And if the saving throw is made, there's no damage taken, so it's all or nothing. Now, you can see on this table the amount of damage the explosion does, and it's based on the challenge rating of the creature. And I was pleasantly surprised here to see they actually addressed creatures with no challenge rating, because the summoning spells and tashes do not apply a challenge rating to your summoned creature, but you can see here they'll do a number of d6s equal to our proficiency bonus, so I'm glad to see that was addressed. I really like this feature, and the one thing I thought was kind of interesting is that usually when a summoned creature drops to 0 hit points, it doesn't actually die, it disappears. Here our summoned creatures are exploding, so that's a dead summoned creature. Then at 14th level, we get Incarnation of Corruption. This gives us resistance to necrotic damage and a flat +2 armor class bonus. Both of those are nice. In addition, whenever we start our turn within our own defiled ground, we can use a bonus action to get 5 temporary hit points. It becomes 6 temporary hit points at level 17. Of course, then you have to make a decision whether you want to be in your blighted ground area or not. Because although we just got necrotic resistance, we're not immune to necrotic, and it's an extra d8 at this point, so that might end up causing us more damage than the 5 hit point damage per turn. Something to consider. But the flat +2 armor class and the resistance is nice, and I wonder if it should have been immunity to necrotic damage though, but this is still an okay feature. And overall, I'm pretty impressed with this subclass. I don't think it's the most powerful druid, but it's okay, and it's pretty cool thematically. Here's the tier rankings I did for the druid a while back, and I'd put the Circle of the Blighted here on B tier, behind Stars and Wildfire, and power-wise I think it's pretty comparable to those subclasses, maybe a little bit weaker, but not disastrously so. So yeah, I think I've made it no secret that I'm a pretty big fan of the design here. Just some really nitpicky stuff that I don't think is going to cause you any issues. When does the sapling take its turn? You're going to have to figure that out with your DM, and you should be good to go with a pretty well-balanced and designed subclass. As a DM, I would have no concerns at all allowing this subclass at my table. And in my next video, a monk subclass. Well, we'll take a good look at that soon. Otherwise, until then, I'm going to sit back, relax, and have some fun. D&D is for everyone. Thanks everybody, and I'll talk to you soon.